Well, it's been a couple days. Let's talk about some more horror. I just saw Jordan Peele's new movie, Us, and I liked it for the most part. This is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I'm going to try and do my best to discuss the movie without getting too much into the nitty-gritty of the story elements, although there's some criticisms that lie in there as well, so I'm going to try my best to touch on all that. So let's get into it. I'm kind of scatterbrained right now because this movie left quite an impression on me, and I'm definitely thinking about it a lot, which is a positive. But on the other hand, a lot of the things I'm thinking about are somewhat negative. So let's start with the good. So Jordan Peele, as everyone knows, released Get Out a couple years back, and I thought it was a great film. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but there's definitely things that on the technical side of the movie that I saw could have used some improvement. And fortunately, in the movie Us, I think that there is a lot of improvement in that. One of my biggest complaints with Get Out was that the movie looked good and it was technically well done and well lit and everything, but it didn't have much of a style to it. And when the horror elements were implemented into the movie, granted they were shocking and they were enjoyable to watch on screen. However, I don't think the look of the movie ever really corresponded to that too well. In Us, that completely changes. Right from the get-go, this movie has a very striking look. Everything is framed really nicely. Everything that's in the frame has a purpose of being there. And it has just a very atmospheric horror look to it. And I love what they do with some of the night scenes, how they shoot that in the movie. The opening scene was something that I found to stand out the most as far as cinematography goes. But all throughout the movie, everything looks really nice. And the acting is great. I gotta commend all the actors in this movie because the main cast does a great job. The stand-up being Lupita Nyong'o, because she's killing it. I've liked her as an actress for a while and everything I've seen her in, but she really shines in this movie. But my hats go off to the whole cast because they're all not only playing one character, but they're playing the reverse side of their character, as you've seen in the trailer. So that's got to be a hard balance, but they play it off really well, and the dynamic worked extremely well. So those are all positives. I like that. I like the setup for the movie. I think the first probably 30-40 minutes of this movie are probably its strongest. Getting to know the family, seeing their dynamic, and seeing their friends who are also at this vacation home that they reside in, that was all great. I think one of Jordan Peele's greatest strengths as a writer is that he really knows how to write likable characters. So when things hit the fan, you really care about what's going on, and you don't want to see, you don't want to see bad stuff happen to these characters you've grown so attached to. So he does that really well here. I think incredibly well. I mean, I liked all the characters in Get Out, but this movie really makes you care about the main family and what's going on in the story. So all that setup's great. So as you can see, there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot to like about this movie. Which makes some of the negatives I have for it kind of painful. So let's get into it a little bit. After the whole family dynamic's been set up, we see who they are as characters. The main character, played by Lupita, we see her background and some of the traumas that haunt her throughout the movie. So all that stuff's great. I really, really like it. This movie has a good sense of comedy at the beginning. All the characters are funny. The dad character, of course, is a standout. He's most of the comic relief throughout the whole movie. And the jokes are always funny, but I don't think they're always utilized quite well. It's kind of a similar critique I had for Get Out when that came out, because the comedy scenes in that movie are always funny. And for the most part, they work. I think they work a little better sometimes in Get Out than they do in Us. But a common complaint I have for both of the movies is that sometimes the comedy is clashing a bit with the horror, and it doesn't always work. It kind of feels a little tonally confused. I was getting some flashbacks to the Halloween sequel, I guess, that came out last year, in the sense that there was some funny moments, and I'll be honest, the comedy moments in these two movies are much funnier than in the Halloween sequel, but it works as an interesting parallel because there would be a scene in that movie where something scary would happen and there would still be a comedic, a joke.
Oh shit!
And it would get a laugh out of the audience, but it would lessen the horror experience. So it's just kind of frustrating because if they would just commit to one tone and stick with the horror, I don't think anyone would complain. I think it'd better the movie for it. And there was definitely instances in Us that I had that frustrating experience of, like that's a funny joke, but let's just bask in the moment here. There's a scene about probably a good way through the middle of the movie where they're doing some interesting stuff with the soundtrack, and a Beach Boys song is implemented. And I thought it was a very unnerving scene that worked really well as kind of using a happy contrasting song against the horrible scene that's going on. And so it worked as a nice juxtaposition. But then they cut that short for a joke within the soundtrack, and it kind of lessens the overall blow. So there was stuff like that I was a little disappointed in. So yeah, a lot of good, some bad. Those are all the technical things. I think as far as pacing goes, this movie always worked for me for the most part. I was usually pretty invested in the movie. So let's get into a few of the times the story doesn't always work. So this movie has a good script that has a few glaring issues that come towards mostly the middle of the movie. Especially towards the end, there's some earth-shattering revelations that come along. And while they are shocking in the moment, the more you think about them, the more the logistics of them start to crumble a little bit. Because I enjoyed Jordan Peele's Get Out so much, I think he did a fantastic job on that script. That script feels really tightly written, really concise. It feels like everything in there works for the betterment of the movie, and that it has its themes intact. And there's some social commentary, of course, which was used as one of the selling points of the movie because it is kind of the whole point of the movie. Those two things are coinciding to work for a greater story. I thought that Get Out had a fantastic script, so I was excited to see where Us would go. And like I said, I think there's well-written things here. All the story elements in the beginning of the movie, as well as making the characters likable and making you care about their goals and motivations. I think all that stuff, it works. It's strong. Through and through, the whole time, I cared about what was happening. The problem is, this movie, it's kind of a positive and a negative here. I'm going to try my best to explain why that is. On the bright side, this movie excels what it promises in its premise, which is good. It goes above and beyond, and it genuinely shocked me in moments. The problem with that is it kind of overdoes it. The promise of the premise is kind of over the moon at a certain point of this movie, and I think there's too many greater themes, too many large plot points that kind of don't really work for the betterment of the movie like they did in Get Out. There's a lot of good ideas here. I never at any point thought the movie was dumb or had a bad story idea. They just didn't always work with what I thought the story was actually about. It was kind of making not just one fork in the road, but a few. And the story was branching out and trying to reach several different themes. And because of that, I don't think it really latched on to one strong idea. I think this movie has a really good score and soundtrack, starting with the theme that was used in the trailers. It was kind of the original Five on It song, and then it transformed into an orchestral version of the song. I thought that was great. I thought it worked really well in the trailer. It sold me on the movie, and I think it worked pretty well in the movie too. The rest of the score worked, and it stood out as a memorable horror soundtrack slash score. There's a lot of mainstream horror movies that kind of don't really have the same bite to the score and soundtrack as some of the classic movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, The Exorcist, and Halloween. This movie has that, and I think that's just one of the other many things that work to boost the horror elements of this movie. Jordan Peele, he's a big fan of horror. That's been made clear through the past couple of years. And I think that passion and love he has for the genre really shines through this movie, in its score, in its visuals. And to see Jordan Peele as a director kind of flourish in his filmmaking abilities, whether it be the camera movement, the editing, the lighting, stuff like that, it's pretty inspiring to see such a transformation just between the span of two movies. I think there's definitely, as far as the technical aspects of this movie go, quite the improvement in comparison to Get Out. So that's really cool to see. I do have my problems with the movie, but I think overall it's a fun time, a good experience. If you're a fan of horror, you're gonna get something out of this movie. I'm kind of interested to see people's interpretation of the ending of the movie, as well as some of the stuff introduced throughout. There's a lot to talk about for this movie. I'll probably see it again sometime. I don't know if I'll rush to see it again because there's a lot to unpack. It's pretty heavy, and it kind of, I don't know, I'm still processing it from my first view. So check out Us. I would recommend it. Despite its negatives, I do think there's a lot to talk about, and I think most people are going to get something out of it. So yeah, check it out. So I had a lot of fun with this video. I'm excited to see where Jordan Peele goes next, whether he stay in the horror genre or kind of branch out and do something new. We'll see. I am very interested in following him as a director, so only time will tell what the... Are you... I was just